Hey guys, back with another video. This time, my top 5 most nostalgic games. Now, these are the 5 games, and it was actually hard getting 5 of these down. I was considering doing a top 10, but I didn't want this video to be too long. And basically, these are the 5 games that give me the most nostalgia when I play them, or even when I watch like videos on them. And I know everybody has like their favorite games that are very nostalgic to them. And you know, this list is based on just how nostalgic I get over these games and like all the memories that start flashing, like that I start having, relating to some of these games. Because I think the most nostalgic games are the ones that you have the most fondest memories of, or some that kind of make you think of something that happened in your life at that time. So yeah, let's get right started. Let's start right away with number 5, which is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, the arcade game for the NES. Now, the NES was the first console I ever owned. It came with, when I got it, now, when I got the NES, the Super Nintendo was actually pretty much on its way out. The N64 was about to come out. Of course, I didn't know this. Like, I didn't know these things, but the system came with Super Mario Brothers, which was the first video game I ever played. Duck Hunt, it was the Duck Hunt cartridge, which I played after that. And RBI Baseball, I think. I never played that much. I didn't even like sports games back on the NES. Like, I haven't liked sports games ever since the beginning. But Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, the arcade game, was the game I played the most out of these. Surprisingly enough, you would think it would have been Mario Brothers, and that game, for some strange reason, isn't very nostalgic to me. Super Mario Brothers 3 is. That's a very nostalgic game to me, and I played that later. But Ninja Turtles 2 is the game I played the most, and it was a two-player game, so I could play it with my brother, and I have such fond memories of like sitting down in front of her, like it was like this big ass CRT TV that was so damn heavy to carry this thing. It was just massive. I would just remember me and him just sitting down there on the floor, just playing this game nonstop. And it was fucking hard. Like, Ninja Turtles 2, the arcade game, is very difficult. This is a port of the arcade game. And obviously, visually, it's like nowhere near as impressive as the arcade version. But overall, it's a pretty solid port that I think holds up decent today. I'll admit, if you're not really into beat 'em ups, it probably doesn't hold up well at all. Because I think people don't even like the arcade game all that much anymore these days, unless you're nostalgic for it and you played it a lot when you were younger. I didn't really grow up with like the arcades because when I was a kid, there was an arcade in the mall, but I never got to go because I guess it wasn't too expensive, but it was like my parents were always like, "Well, you have a video game console at home. Why do you need to go to the arcade?" And I don't know. I just never got the chance to go to the arcade much. Not like it was around for very long though. It was it was gone fairly quickly. But yeah, just fond memories of playing this when I was a kid, and every time I play it, it just gets me so nostalgic. Like the music, the visuals. The two levels that were added for this version, it wasn't a complete. It wasn't the exact same as the arcade version. There was a winter level and a dojo level. I never beat this game when I was a kid. In fact, I've yet to have actually beaten this game. I've gotten as far as Krang, and then I can't beat him. And that was a few years ago that I tried, without cheats, mind you. There's some codes that you could use to get like more lives and continues, I think. But as a kid, the furthest I got was the dojo, and we only got there a few times. Most of the time we got to like the level with Baxter Stockman in it. It was like a city street kind of level, but. The winter level is the most nostalgic level in this game for me. Like the music is fantastic in that level, and just like the wolf boss at the end of that level with he's got like a jacket on. The bosses were very intimidating as a kid. As a kid, I was always, I don't want to say scared, but they always intimidated me when we reached a boss. I don't know, that gets me nostalgic whenever I see the bosses. The dojo music, like it's this one song that loops very quickly over and over and over again, but it kind of gets stuck in your head, and I kind of really like that song. But yeah, the game it's a very nostalgic game. It's just, all those memories of playing with my brother come back to me, and it's a game I still enjoy to this day, even though it doesn't hold up that well. I'd say Turtles in Time on the Super Nintendo holds up a lot better, and that's another very nostalgic game for me as well. I played that one a ton on the Super Nintendo, but nothing beats the nostalgia for this game, or the arcade game. The Manhattan Project, the game that came out afterwards for the NES. My babysitter had that. That's a very nostalgic game for me as well. Me and my brother played that game a bunch as well, but this is still the king, I think, out of every NES game. Even the Mega Man games, which I was obsessed with Mega Man as a kid, none of them actually come close to this one. Number 4 is the original Diablo on PC, and I've talked about this game before. I'm not going to talk too much about this now. I forget which videos I've talked about it, but it was one of the first mature games I ever played, rated M games, and I remember my dad just brought it home one day on like a burnt disc. Like it wasn't actually an official copy of the game. And it's I don't know. Again, it's one of those games that me and my brother were like pretty obsessed with, and we played it constantly. We never got very far because the original Diablo is actually a very difficult game. I think the furthest we got were like the caves. We never even saw it like Hell or Diablo. My brother did eventually beat it like years later, but I never did. I never actually beat the original Diablo. I never went back to it. I don't go back to it as much as like Diablo 2 because like Diablo 2 I played a lot more. Like that game's like one of my favorite games of all time, but the original is more nostalgic to me. And I just remember it was a new type of game for me, like the point and click kind of hack and slash action and RPG loot type of game. It was the first online game I ever played, back with dial-up, and the fact that I could play with other people, like random people across the world online, was just that was mind-blowing to me. Like I couldn't believe that. So obviously I had a lot of fun with that. It was a very kind of scary game for me too as a kid. I remember like the butcher's room, the first time I ever got to the butcher's room, with all like the dead bodies in there, and they were all like hacked up and shit. And there was like just gore everywhere. And you open his door, and then he just goes, fresh meat. And I was just, that scared the fuck out of me as a kid. Like that, I couldn't even like handle fighting him. And it took forever for me to actually finally be able to beat the butcher. The butcher was tough. You really had to grind quite a bit to actually finally beat him. But yeah, like the atmosphere of that game was just very kind of unsettling. There's a lot of nostalgic memories with that game, like Wirt, finding him and finding all the characters around kind of the main town of Tristram. And then there's the cow that you could find. Like there's a group of cows like to the right of Tristram. Exploring that whole area and just diving deeper into this massive dungeon. Man, it's just such a nostalgic game to me. Like the opening cinematic, the music that plays, and just all the dialogue and voice acting. One of the first games I played with voice acting. I'm trying to think like the town drunk that was there too. Farmer, now I'm drinking peace or something. He says something like that. I don't remember. Like all the voice clips are just permanently stuck in my head, and they just make me laugh when I think of them. But yeah, very very nostalgic game to me. At number 3 is Super Mario World 2 Yoshi's Island. Yes, I know, a game I've talked about a lot. One of my favorite games of all time, and my most nostalgic Super Nintendo game. Even though I actually never owned it, one of my friends owned it, and I would borrow it from him a lot, and just I don't know. It was one of the first games I've actually ever completed, so I guess that's probably a main reason why it's so nostalgic to me. The soundtrack, like every time I play it, the soundtrack is just brings back all these memories. Of course, the amazing visuals, the gameplay, the boss battles. The boss battles were very memorable in that game to me. Like all the secrets that game had. And one particular memory that I might have mentioned this in another video, but I actually kind of lost the game on one of my friends. It was a weird story because I had brought the game to school. I remember this so vividly, and this is probably one of the big reasons why this game is so nostalgic to me. For whatever reason, I had it we had these desks in school where you could put binders and stuff like inside the actual desk. And I had Yoshi's Island in there because I was going to give it back to my friend at lunchtime or whatever. I think he was in another classroom, but for whatever reason I brought it out and started looking at it, and the guy next to me, I still remember his name too. I doubt he's watching this, but Jake McIntyre was his name. I remember his name, and he actually left a few years later. He didn't stick around at the school I was in. And I haven't seen him since. But he saw that I was looking at this game. I was like, and he was like, "Hey, can I look at that? What is that?" And I was like, "Oh, sure." I let him look at it. He looks at the game. I remembered I kind of had work to do or something, so I was doing my work while I was looking at it. I kind of forgot that he had it or whatever. So 5 minutes later, I kind of "Oh yeah, right. Can I have the game back?" And he looks at me. He goes, "What game?" I'm like, "The game I let you look at." He's like, "I don't know what you're talking about." And I argued with him back and forth, and he just flat out didn't say that he had the game. And I remember this. So this is kind of embarrassing too, because I brought it up to the teacher. I was like, he stole my game. And I guess the teacher actually went through his desk and the game wasn't there. I guess he put it in his backpack or something. And that was it. He wouldn't give the game back. And yeah, needless to say, my friend got really pissed off with me. But yeah, that just is always in my head. Like that, every time I think of Yoshi's Island and play Yoshi's Island, that memory always comes back to me, because it was very interesting. But yeah, Yoshi's Island, very, very nostalgic game to me. Number 2 is Pokemon Red and Blue, a very, very nostalgic game to me. I was just the right age for this game when it came out. Obviously, Pokemon was a huge craze at my school, and but at the time the game came out, I was already collecting the cards. One funny story with the cards, my brother actually got a Charizard, and of course that was like the card that everyone had to have. And he got the card, right, and he went to school, and everybody was just hounding him, just, oh, I'll trade you this and this and this. And people would just not leave him alone. So he came from home, and I remember he got a pair of scissors and cut the card in half. Yeah, that was pretty crazy. I always look back and I was like, why didn't he just give it to me? But anyways, the game, very, very nostalgic. Of course, went for all the 150 Pokemon. The music. If there's one thing about this game that every time I watch videos on it, the thing that gets me the most nostalgic, it's that music, man. I actually really like the soundtrack in Pokemon Red and Blue, and just how like it's the Game Boy sound chip wasn't anything special, but what they were able to do with the soundtrack for that game is pretty remarkable, I think. Obviously, the black and white. I was playing this on a Game Boy Pocket. Didn't have the old fat, the original Game Boy, which I can't stand. The Game Boy Pocket was actually amazing. But yeah, everyone had this game at school. Everyone was playing it and trading Pokemon, and so like a lot of great school memories of this game and just Pokemon in general, actually. And I've kind of been somewhat of a fan of this series ever since, and I think a big part of that is nostalgia. Every time I play a Pokemon game, even the recent, I tend to skip like every other entry, but Pokemon X and Y, even that game, even though it's got the 3D visuals, it still made me kind of feel nostalgic, and I think that's probably why I keep coming back to the series all these years later. And I guess one other memory that kind of has like a big reason why this game kind of holds a special place for me. I remember my grandfather. He took a bus to where I was, and we took a bus back to Toronto where he lived. I spent some time with them, and on the way there and back, I remember I would play this game like nonstop. This was one of like my first big gaming addictions to as Pokemon Red and Blue, and I look back on that with some regret too. I didn't really end up talking to him all that much, at least for the bus trips. But yeah, unfortunately, that was the last time I ever saw him. He died not too long after that. So it's kind of got a sad memory attached to the game, but. At the same time, it definitely it's nostalgic, right? It's a game that has a lot of memories attached to it for me. So yeah, a big game in my childhood too. And I think it's still a relatively playable game. I do remember there was a cave. I forget what the cave is called, but you push a bunch of boulders into holes. That was always annoying to me, even as a kid. And it's when I tried to play this game. Actually, it was quite a while ago, probably 5 years ago now. Playing the remake, Fire Red and Leaf Green, I think. That cave pissed me off then as well, but very nostalgic game, Pokemon Red and Blue. And at number 1, perhaps an obvious choice, The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. Probably like the number 1 nostalgic game for a lot of people. And even though it's not quite my favorite Zelda game anymore, like I've said before, Majora's Mask has surpassed it. There might even be a few others that have too now that I think about it, but nothing beats the nostalgia for this game that I have for this game. Every time I watch a video or play it or even or hear music from it, and I always actually listen to this game's soundtrack pretty regularly. The most nostalgic thing is that intro. The intro, right off the bat, the first-person view of Navi flying throughout Kokiri Village, and then man, just that intro sequence, man. It's so nostalgic, and this is like the only game where it's like I don't know. I get emotional every time I play this game or hear music from it or watch a video of it. The N64. A lot of people hate it these days, but it's a very nostalgic system for me. It's when I really got into gaming, I would say, where I was regularly going out buying and renting games like constantly. Because with the NES and Super Nintendo, I would rent basically all my games. But this was the first console where I would go and actually buy games, and this was one of the first games I ever bought when it came out. I don't think I got it on release day though. I think it was like a few months after. But I remember going to Zeller's here in Canada. I don't know if it was Zeller's in the U.S., but I remember going to the store to Zeller's, and it was there for. I remember this. I think it was like $89.99. I think was the price on it. Like it was ridiculously expensive, but I remember buying it and just. It was one of the first video games I ever fully completed from start to finish, and just going through that game. Like so many memories with that game. Like it was a difficult game for me. Like because it was. You had all the puzzles, right? The dungeons with the puzzles. A lot of them were kind of tough for me to figure out, but eventually I got through it. I made my way through the game. And then years later, I 100%ed the game for the first time. And I remember I had a strategy guide that I used to 100% the game. And I remember it was very annoying getting all the gold Skulltulas, getting the 100 gold Skulltulas. Like that, that's one of those things I never want to do ever again. Like even though I love the game, those were a pain in the ass to get. But yeah, every time I play the game, I don't know, it brings me back, man. I get all these memories. It was awesome back playing the N64, where you didn't have many worries. I was still a kid in like elementary school. There wasn't too much to worry about. I could just sit at home and just play this video game constantly. It was just so enjoyable, and I don't know. It's a bit hard to explain just how much this game kind of means to me, but it certainly made me a fan of the series. I had played A Link to the Past before, but I was terrible at that game. I didn't get very far, and I would only rent it. So actually owning this game and being able to complete it, I was able to enjoy it to the fullest, and the nostalgia is just unbeatable. When Link meets Sarah on the bridge there. I don't know, that's a very heavy moment for me too. For whatever, I don't know. Every time I play the game and reach that part of the game, I get a bit emotional. I don't know. The game's just I don't know. It's a fantastic game, very very nostalgic. But yeah, that's the list, guys. Oh, I actually know another thing with Ocarina of Time, the fishing mini game. I played the fuck out of that fishing mini game. I was obsessed with that fishing mini game. I probably put more hours into the fishing than the actual game. Crazy as that sounds, but yeah, those are my games. Of course, there's plenty more games that I could have probably added to the list. Like pretty much every NES, Super Nintendo game, and N64 game I played when I was a kid is nostalgic to me in one way or another. In terms of games, I wish I had the nostalgia for. The big one for me. There's a bunch of games I could bring up, but Final Fantasy VII. I listen to all these people that talk about that game and all the memories they had, and of the PS1 in general. And I really wish I had the nostalgia for that game. I wish it was like that important game for me, and I wish it was the game that brought me into the genre of RPGs. It wasn't really until Tales of Symphonia way later that I got more into JRPGs, unfortunately. And I owned the PS1 for less than a year, and for whatever reason, I didn't get to play Final Fantasy VII. I didn't even know anybody that had it. Kind of strange, right? I don't know. Just everyone I knew growing up had the Nintendo systems, and even when it was the 64, the Saturn, and the PlayStation 1, no one I knew had PlayStation 1. Everyone had N64. The Saturn, I hadn't even heard of the Saturn until way later. I swear that didn't even exist in Canada. Or at least where I was in rural Canada. But yeah, Final Fantasy VII, I really wish I had the nostalgia for that game. Unfortunately, I just don't. Great game, though. I really enjoyed that. But yeah, those are my games. What games are nostalgic for you? What are your top fives? Any particular memories you guys have? I want to thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.